One thing that came out of nowhere recently was the news that Toyota is going to be teaming up with the Haas Formula 1 team, a move that's expected to help boost Haas's midfield fortunes and help bring them closer to the grid, and it's a dose of ambition for a team that's accused of not having any. As it stands, Formula 1's latest addition to the grid, and by that I mean a team that has started from scratch and not bought into an existing team like Audi has, buys everything that it can from Ferrari, to the point where the Haas cars are essentially Ferrari clones. Well, I mean, to an extent anyway, because the car itself has to be designed by Haas or designed by Haas and built by somebody else, but inside that car is a Ferrari gearbox, a Ferrari engine, they've got Ferrari suspension. Basically, everything that Haas doesn't have to make themselves is shipped in from Maranello. And Haas, despite showing some early promise, has often been the subject of ridicule from fans. There's the calamitous sponsorship deal with Rich Energy that was one story after another and made everybody involved look silly. There's the current back and forth between the team and the Mazepin family because there's been claims of this, that and the other being filed, and the 2021 season where Haas finished plumb last on 0 points with a car that was by far the slowest on the grid. But not 1997 Lola slow or life in 1990 slow. Now, if you're one of these newer fans that's only been watching for a couple of years, look those two teams up. They were slow. At some point within the last 12 months, Gunther Steiner, who is Formula 1's answer to Malcolm Tucker and also the star of the Drive to Survive Netflix series, got sacked, and his replacement is Io Komatsu, and I hope I've pronounced his first name correctly. But the thing is, Komatsu has set about building Haas up, because not only are they the newest team on the grid, they're also the smallest. There's only around 300 people working for the team, which is more than some of these Italian meme teams from the late 80s and 90s had, but it's still a lot less than the likes of Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes and McLaren, who will likely have triple the personnel on board. Well, if Red Bull keeps losing people, then that will skew the stats slightly, but you know what I mean. This is why Haas operates with this somewhat controversial method of having Dallara build the cars and then they buy everything else that it can from Ferrari. Now though, Toyota are on board and supplying their knowledge and other bits and pieces. Oh, so this means they're getting Toyota engines in 2026 then? No, it does not. It's more of a technical partnership. Haas lacks a lot of the facilities to get them further up the grid, but Toyota has a lot of experience with racing cars in other categories. The old base in Cologne, where Toyota operated the F1 team from, is now the home of the Toyota hypercar and rally projects, so it's all still being used, and the expertise from there will then translate over into the Formula 1 stuff. Because at the minute, Toyota seems to have a lot going on across the motorsport world. Not only are they back in Formula 1, although it seems Toyota are insisting that this isn't a comeback since a true comeback would be with their own team, they also have the brand represented in NASCAR, the British Touring Car Championship, the WRC, and most recently, Toyota announced they'll be heading into supercars in Australia with the Supra in 2026, something that will be run by Walkinshaw Andretti United down there, while two other not announced teams will also have cars. And for Toyota, this will be a better way of doing things compared to their utter failure as a constructor in the 2000s. Famously, Toyota spent massive money for a couple of glory run low fuel pole positions and a handful of podiums, never being able to capture that win that the manufacturers were all chasing at that particular time. If you're not aware, Toyota also never really had driver lineups that were ever capable of being world beaters, despite having the money available for them to pretty much sign anybody they wanted. In 2002 they had Mika Salo and Alan McNish, and to be fair to McNish, he was considered one of the best drivers in the world to have not participated in Formula 1, and was one of the best endurance guys out there at the time, and partnering in with Salo, who had experience but was also at the end of his career, wasn't exactly a good choice. The following year they went with Olivier Panis and Cristiano De Matta. Panis also at the end of his career and was never the same driver since he broke his legs at Montreal in 1997. And Panis was matched to a driver who was pretty much only there because he just won the kart series in a Toyota powered car. In 2004 they had 4 drivers: De Matta, Zonta, Panis and Trulli, with Trulli joining right at the end of the season following his sacking from Renault. 2005 though seemed to be a step in the right direction. They had Trulli and Schumacher. But it was Ralph, who was on wages so big at the time, the joke was that Toyota must have thought they were signing Vermichael instead. Toyota did get a smattering of podiums through 2005, but you might argue that being on Michelin's was a benefit to them, and they did manage to finish 4th in the standings. But in 2006 they started to slip back, probably because in a bizarre business decision, Toyota swapped to Bridgestone tyres when the 2006 car had been designed for Michelin's, and they weren't able to get the same amount of performance. But as it was, Toyota couldn't reach the same lofty heights that they had done in 2005. After slipping back a little bit further, they decided to pull out at the end of the 2009 season, citing the same economic meltdown that BMW and also Honda had cited for their withdrawal from the sport. But Toyota had designed a car for 2010, and it was supposed to be sold to Stefan GP or one of these other teams that was supposed to be coming in around this time. But it's a car that somehow gets a tenth of a second faster every time somebody who used to work at Toyota talks about it. I think compared to the 2009 car, it's now at 2.5 seconds. Yeah, it's like the modern version of the turbo engines gaining 100 horsepower every 10 years or so. So for this comeback, but don't actually call it a comeback, Toyota isn't financially committed in the same way it would be if it was going all in with Haas and doing what Audi is doing to Sauber. And this suits Toyota just fine, because Toyota can send engineers out that can get experience, and they only have to pay for those engineers and where they're staying and what they're eating. They don't have to pay entry fees, they don't have to pay for parts, they don't have to pay for R&D and all those other bits and pieces. Those engineers will work with Haas to get the car a little bit further up the grid using the stuff back in Cologne, and it should hopefully pay off as Komatsu is in the middle of a recruitment drive at Haas, something that was kicked off as early as the Australian Grand Prix this year. But those engineers won't be working with the team just yet. Hopefully they will be in the future. So there's going to be some assumption that there's some sort of interview, audition, or recruitment process that they have to go through. But this is something that Komatsu definitely wants to get on with doing, because Toyota has so many resources that Haas simply does not have. So how does all this work then? Well, Autosport has already done its little cut out and keep guide which shows how this works, and it does look pretty clever. It's a technical partnership, and it's a sponsorship, but at the same time it's not a sponsorship, if that makes any sense. As Komatsu explained in the Autosport article on this, if they buy parts from Dallara or Ferrari, they simply pay for the parts. Money exchanges hands and they get the parts that they need. And that money is raised through prize money and sponsorship, like the sponsorship money they receive from MoneyGram and other brands that have their stickers on the car. But if Haas was to go to Toyota and say, "Hey lads, can you make us a new front wing?" Instead of handing over the 150 grand or however much it is for that front wing, Toyota simply docks it from the sponsor pot. So if they were giving Haas 5 million euros as a pulled out of my arse random number, the amount they then give them in sponsorship is... Hang on, the mental arithmetic isn't easy for me. It's 4,850,000 euros. That is right, isn't it? Numbers are very hard for me. Anybody that's watched this stuff for more than a few years will attest that on many occasions I have screwed up the most basic of stuff. But as Autosport has made clear, this isn't like the deal that Alfa Romeo had with Sauber. MoneyGram will still be the title sponsor, and that deal is in the ballpark of around 25 to 35 million US dollars per year, and that deal will still carry on unless things change. So expecting a throwback Panasonic Toyota livery next season, you're just going to be disappointed. And don't be disappointed if the livery is the same next year as it is this year. So it seems like a good idea all round. Haas is getting something out of this. They're getting money and they're getting expertise from Toyota, and Toyota's also getting something out of this. They're able to send engineers out to be trained in Formula One's inner workings. But on top of this, there's other stuff beyond the whole supplying of knowledge and the whole financial thing, and I didn't realise this until it was mentioned somewhere else. So as you might already know, Formula One has strict rules on which cars you can and can't use for testing and TV work. You might have seen this if you live in the UK, but you might not have seen it if you live outside of the UK. There was a programme on Channel 4 a few years back where David Coulthard and Guy Martin did a bike versus car challenge at Silverstone, where they set up some little challenges and they went about seeing which was best, bike or car. I mean, it's car. The car is better, clearly. Although the bike did win a couple of challenges because it weighs less than a bag of sugar. No replacement for displacement? Yes, there is. It's called
power to weight.
In that programme, which was aired back in 2016, Coulthard is driving the 2013 Red Bull, not because it's a V8 and the V8 sounds better than the V6, but simply because that was the most recent car they could use at that particular time. Because if they allowed the teams to just use whatever they wanted, suddenly all the teams would be doing filming days where conveniently there's 997 blokes there with laptops grabbing every single piece of data they can, and each of these filming days takes a week to complete. and 400 laps per day. Point is, the other teams have the ability to supply these cars to Top Gear, Channel 4, Katie's Amazing Machines, Blue Peter and all these other shows because they have the resources available to do that kind of thing, sending the bare minimum crew to be able to run the car. Or they can go to an actual track day at somewhere like Silverstone or Jerez or Estoril or Portimao or just name a track and put kids like Liam Lawson, Kimi Antonelli and so on in the car for a run around so they can evaluate them. Haas, meanwhile, has to wait until the official FIA tests, of which there is just one during pre-season. And that test will be the two main drivers getting all the seat time they can get so they're ready in time for the first Grand Prix. Now, thanks to Toyota's input, Haas can set up their own testing of an older car program, which is called TPC, testing of a previous car, where they can then use these test days to train the Toyota engineers and give Toyota's young drivers a runaround. And these TPC tests fall outside of the cost cap, which is even better. It could mean that for commercial purposes and just banter, that Toyota sticks Kalle Rovanperä in a Formula 1 car to see what happens. That's a scary thought, because if that kid is as quick with downforce as he is going sideways, then the sport's done for. Rovanperä is probably the best driver in the world right now, and that's not Verstappen, Hamilton or Alonso fan rage bait. But saying that, it looks like there has already been that kind of speculation in the Finnish media. Would be interesting to see how that all works, because this is the same FIA that wouldn't give Sebastian Loeb a super license because he didn't have enough experience in open wheel cars. Sebastian Loeb, probably the greatest driver of the last 30 years. Not even he could get a super license. But if Rovanperä did get a super license and then got to race in Formula 1, there would be absolute limbs on the other side of the Atlantic because Colton Herta will still be going, "Where's mine?" Okay, I should probably explain what that means because someone mentioned it when I did the same joke on the races post about Toyota. When something happens, people say, "Oh, absolute scenes." In football communities, it's called limbs, from the waving of the hands and the fist bumping when a goal is scored. I saw one comment on the internet once, "You didn't make any noise all game and you got shit limbs." Although in Herta's case, the limbs would be the angry shaking of a fist rather than the full wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man. On top of this, Haas will also be getting a simulator designed for them by Toyota, and when it all boils down, Haas will be able to run a way more cost-effective operation as everything will be scaled up, and Toyota will be able to get involved with some of the stuff that Dallara and Ferrari are already involved in. But does that mean at some point there will be a Toyota engine in the back of the Haas? Unlikely, because Haas is signed up with Ferrari until at least 2028. But it could mean that Toyota builds the Haas cars for them in the future instead of Dallara, but while that's more likely, it's not going to be an instant switch. While Dallara could do the initial car, Toyota could also be teaming up with them to work out some of the bits and pieces. But I don't know. That's going to have to be a wait and see. But it does raise some concerns because Haas is literally all over the place. As a company, Haas is based in Kannapolis in North Carolina. The Formula 1 team is based in Banbury in Oxfordshire. The Toyota stuff is all going to be done in Cologne, Germany, and the car is manufactured by Dallara in Italy, and Haas has a design office in Maranello. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was making jokes about how the engine department for Renault is in France and the F1 team is near Oxford, and how that was all going tits up. But even back when Toyota was doing its thing in Honda as well, the engines were built in Japan, the cars were built in Europe, and the two never worked out. But at the same time, Ferrari, Dallara and Toyota are good people to have on your list of associates. But the question remains, is Factory A going to have a spat with Factory B that somehow makes Factory C also get in on things, and then you start having it all just dissolve? But it has to be said that any turnaround in 2025 is not going to be immediate. It will need at least 12 months to bed in because Toyota influence is not going to be seen until towards the end of next season, with it not properly being realised until 2026. The new deal actually starts at the US Grand Prix this weekend, which is quite good timing since it's Haas's home Grand Prix. Well, one of them at least, but Komatsu has been showing some serious vision as of late, and you would think that him being Japanese would have had a part to play in the deal. But it's showing what is possible when you put engineering-minded people in charge of a racing team. With rumours and speculation that Gene Haas doesn't want to invest in the Formula 1 team or any team, given that Stewart Haas Racing will be closing its doors soon in NASCAR, although Tony Stewart is doing other projects too, like his NHRA stuff, so it might not necessarily be just down to Gene. But either way, Komatsu getting Toyota in is not just needs must, but it's also a massive coup. With Haas having quite the image issue at the minute given the sponsorship controversies of 2019 and also 2021, having one of the biggest motoring manufacturers in the world part of the team for very little financial input is a brilliant idea, because there's not as much commitment involved on Toyota's part, so they can be in and they don't have to worry about counting all the money towards the end of it. So on paper at least, it's a fantastic idea. Last year, Haas brought a massive upgrade to the US Grand Prix at Austin, where they basically tried to copy the Red Bull style side pods, going for that, F15 Eagle style design. Komatsu had been against the idea, but Steiner had spearheaded the upgrades. The upgrades flopped, but as the race mentioned, it was kind of typical of how Haas was running at that time. They had so many limitations that now, at least in theory, they can be ironed out. And the Komatsu era at Haas is starting to look a lot rosier, because this is their best season since, let me just check Wikipedia here, 2018. Haas is making a good go of things in 2024. They sit 7th in the Constructors as it currently stands, with something like, 6 races to go, 5 races to go, and the best finish this season has been 6th for Hulkenberg, twice. So the car has been showing that it can be a good performer. The rest of Hulk's results show him knocking on the door of getting points. There's a few 11th places here on the board, there's a couple of 13ths, but he's going to be gone at the end of the year because he's going to Sauber/Audi. In his and Magnussen's place will be Ollie Behrman, who has scored points at both of his substitute appearances this year, and Esteban Ocon, who might be looking to make amends after his ousting from Alpine. As one person mentioned in the comment threads, Haas over the last few years has hardly been screaming pinnacle of motorsport, and Sauber and Alpine have been so utterly awful that they've been struggling to beat Haas over the course of this season. It shows how Komatsu has been running stuff and how Haas has gone about 2024 with a sense of purpose, to rescue its image and get further up the grid. The question is, will it work? But at least now, with the cost caps, Toyota won't be spending billions for nothing. So then, a look at what's happening over at Haas and the new Toyota input that they're going to be receiving. If this thing has made you think things about the thing, then like this thing so I know I did a good job. And for more things from this channel, hit the subscribe button thing and also ring the bell thing so you never miss out on any thing that I do around here. Massive thanks as ever go out to the rad lads at Patreon for the continued support. And if you want to help support this channel at a more personal level and receive my unconditional love, then a link to Patreon is in the description, along with links to Discord, socials and other bits and bobs that you might want or need to know. There's also links down there to my affiliates where if you buy stuff I get a kickback, and there's also memberships for those that want to do it Patreon style without Patreon, and there's also super thanks if you just want to buy me a coffee. So until next time, I've been AdmiralLaWind, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.